There is a mailbox in rural Pennsylvania that should not exist. Every weekday morning, a United States Postal Service truck pulls onto a road that Google Maps refuses to render. The driver stops at a steel mailbox bolted into a concrete post. He opens the box. He places 3 letters inside. He closes the box. He drives away. And by the end of the week, the letters are gone. Somebody picks them up. The Census Bureau forgot to count this address in 2010. The Census Bureau forgot to count it again in 2020. The road that leads to this mailbox does not appear on any commercial mapping service. The town it serves has no published population, and yet somebody picks up the mail. I am Report State, and what you are about to hear is not a conspiracy. It is a list of coordinates. 10 of them. 10 American towns that have been removed, erased, redacted, evacuated, or quietly classified out of public knowledge. Some were poisoned by their own ground. Some were bought out and bulldozed. Some were declared unfit for human habitation, and one of them, the one we end on tonight, was scrubbed off the map by direct request from the Department of Energy. The road still goes there. The mailbox still exists. The address still receives federal correspondence. But on the map you carry in your pocket, where the town should be, there is only a green smear of forest. America loves its highways. America loves its blue dots, its turn-by-turn directions, its little glowing arrow that says, "You are here." But there are places in this country where the arrow stops, where the road becomes a dotted line, and then nothing. Where you can stand in a clearing, hold your phone above your head, and watch the GPS spin in confusion because the system was never permitted to know where you are. We are going to walk through 10 of those places tonight. We are going to count them down from number 10 to number 1. And by the time we reach number 1, you are going to understand that the country you live in has hidden rooms, and that somebody, somewhere, would prefer you never open the doors. Before we begin, do me one small favor. Subscribe to this channel, not because I need the number, because the next time you take a long road trip across the American interior, you are going to want to know which zip codes to avoid. You are going to want to know which roads end in fences. You are going to want to know which towns will not let you leave once you arrive. This is a public service. Treat it as one. Let me give you the teaser before we count down. One of these towns was bought, in full, by the Environmental Protection Agency for $33 million in 1983, and then bulldozed flat, and 6 of its original residents quietly stayed behind in defiance of the federal order. One of these towns is a military buffer zone where you cannot enter without a written invitation from a base commander, and where the population on paper is 0, but the parking lot has 400 cars in it every weekday morning. And the number 1 town on this list, the final one, is officially classified as forest. Officially. The zip codes around it have been administratively dissolved. The roads have been stripped from public mapping. The town does not exist in any commercial database. But the people who work there report to it 5 days a week, and the trucks that supply it run on a schedule. And the mailman, the same mailman I described to you a minute ago, drops letters into a box that the United States government insists is not standing on any street in any place. Let's break it down. Number 10. Number 10. Times Beach, Missouri. The town that drowned in its own roads. You have to understand what Times Beach was before it became what it became. It was a small resort community on the Merrimack River, founded in the 1920s, a working-class summer escape from the heat of St. Louis. About 2,000 residents, mobile homes, trailers, modest single-family houses on plots no bigger than a postage stamp, a general store, a volunteer fire department, the kind of American town that nobody outside the county had any reason to think about. In 1972, the town hired a man named Russell Bliss to spray waste oil on the unpaved streets. This was a normal practice in rural America at the time. Waste oil suppressed dust. It hardened the road surface. It was cheap. The town paid Russell Bliss a few $1,000s and considered the matter closed. What nobody told the town, what Russell Bliss himself may not have fully understood, was that the waste oil he had loaded into his truck that summer had been mixed at a chemical reprocessing facility with industrial sludge from a company that manufactured Agent Orange. The sludge contained dioxin. Specifically, it contained 2,3,7,8 tetrachlorodibenzo-P-dioxin, a compound so toxic that the lethal dose for a guinea pig is measured in micrograms. Russell Bliss sprayed this oil on every road in Times Beach. He sprayed it in the parking lot of the general store. He sprayed it in the driveways of private homes. He sprayed it on the dirt floors of horse arenas across eastern Missouri. Within months, horses began to die. Birds dropped from the rafters of the spraying barns. Children developed mysterious skin lesions. By 1982, the United States Centers for Disease Control had identified Times Beach as the most contaminated civilian site in American history. In December of that year, a flood swept through the town. The dioxin in the soil moved. It surfaced. It pooled. The Environmental Protection Agency arrived in February 1983 and informed every resident that the town would have to be evacuated permanently. The federal government did not just close Times Beach, it bought it. The EPA acquired every parcel of land in the town for a total of approximately $33 million in 1983 currency. Every house was demolished. Every road was scraped down to bedrock. The contaminated soil was hauled to a giant incinerator that operated for years on the edge of the former town site, burning the dioxin out of the dirt at temperatures hot enough to melt steel. Today, if you drive west on Interstate 44 out of St. Louis, you will pass a state park called Route 66 State Park. It sits on the exact footprint of Times Beach. There are picnic tables. There is a visitor center. There is a small museum about the road, and about the town that used to be there, and about the dioxin. But the town itself, the streets, the houses, the general store, the volunteer fire department, is gone. Bulldozed, buried, burned. The official population of Times Beach, Missouri is 0. The zip code has been retired. The post office has been decommissioned. On most commercial maps, the name does not appear at all. And yet, 6 former residents, 6 elderly people who had lived in Times Beach since the 1940s, refused to leave. They negotiated, individually, with the federal government to remain on a small, carved-out parcel inside the buyout zone. They lived there until they died. The last of them passed away in the late 1990s. After that, Times Beach was, finally, completely empty. Picture this. You drive past a green sign that says Route 66 State Park. You pull into the parking lot. You walk along a paved trail that used to be Main Street. The asphalt under your feet is 20 feet of clean fill dirt poured over the ashes of 2,000 burned houses. There are no foundations visible. There are no street signs. The only thing that tells you a town used to be here is a small bronze plaque, half hidden behind a maintenance shed, that says in modest lettering, __, quote _0 __. Here's the take. The American government, when it decides a place is too poisoned to inhabit, does not seal it off and put up warning signs. It buys it, it demolishes it, and it pretends on every official document going forward that it never existed. Times Beach was the first time the federal government did this on a town-wide scale. It would not be the last. If you think Times Beach is the saddest entry on this list, wait until you see the town that the government tried to do this to and the residents fought back for 30 years. Number 9. Treece, Kansas. The town that refused to die. Treece sits in the very bottom corner of southeastern Kansas, on the Oklahoma border, in a region known historically as the Tri-State Mining District. From the 1880s through the 1970s, this district produced more lead and zinc ore than any other place on Earth. Treece, along with its sister town of Picher, just across the state line in Oklahoma, was built directly on top of one of the richest ore bodies in North America. The ore is still there. So is everything that was left behind when the mines closed. When you mine lead and zinc, you produce something called chat, a coarse, sandy, gray-white tailings material that contains every trace of lead, cadmium, and arsenic that the smelters could not extract. In Treece, the chat piles grew. They grew for decades. By the time the last mine in the district closed in 1970, the chat piles around Treece were the size of small mountains. Some of them were over 200 feet tall. They surrounded the town like a wall of poisoned snow. Children played on the chat piles. They sledded down them in winter. They built forts inside them. The dust from the piles drifted into every house in Treece. It coated the windowsills. It settled in the lungs. By the 1990s, blood lead levels in the children of Treece were among the highest ever recorded in any American population that was not actively employed in a smelter. The Environmental Protection Agency designated the entire region as the Tar Creek Superfund site in 1983. For 25 years, the federal government promised remediation. Trucks came, trucks went. The chat piles, somehow, never got smaller. In 2006, after a series of cave-ins caused by the underground mine shafts collapsing beneath the town, the Army Corps of Engineers concluded that Treece could not be saved. The ground itself was unstable. The chemistry was unfixable. The only solution was depopulation. In 2009, the federal government, through a Government Accountability Office report and a congressional appropriation, formally offered to buy out every resident of Treece. The buyout was voluntary. The price was based on the assessed value of the home, plus a relocation stipend. By 2012, almost everyone had taken the deal. Almost. There was an old couple named Della and Tim Busby who refused to leave. They had lived in Treece for over 40 years. They were both in their 70s. They told the federal government that they had been born here, that their parents had been born here, that the chat piles had not killed them yet, and that nobody from Washington was going to chase them off their own property. The federal government, in turn, did something extraordinary. It dissolved the town around them. In 2012, the Kansas state legislature passed a bill that formally unincorporated Treece. The town ceased to be a legal entity. The mayor's office was abolished. The city council was dissolved. The volunteer fire department was disbanded. The streetlights were turned off. The water service was discontinued. The Busbys remained. Tim Busby died in 2017. Della Busby died in 2018. With her death, the last legal resident of a town that no longer legally existed was gone. Today, Treece, Kansas is officially a ghost town in the most literal sense the word can carry. There are no residents. There is no government. The roads still exist, but they lead nowhere. The houses are mostly demolished. The chat piles are still there. And the population of Treece on every federal document filed since 2018 is 0. A Reddit user who grew up in Treece in the 1980s wrote a few years ago, "We used to call the chat piles snow mountains. We didn't know they were poison. We didn't know what we were breathing. Nobody told us. By the time anyone told us, my brother had already died of leukemia at 26. Picture this. You drive south on Kansas Route 66. You see a green sign that says Treece with the population line scraped off and replaced with a piece of duct tape, and a sign next to it that says, in handwritten marker, "We are not a town. Stop asking." Behind the sign, the chat piles rise into the gray Kansas sky like the spoil heaps of a giant who left and never came back. There are no streetlights. There is no water. There is no mayor. There is only the wind, moving across 200 feet of poisoned tailings, carrying lead dust that the federal government has spent $300 million trying and failing to contain. Here is the take. Times Beach was killed in 18 months. Treece was killed over 40 years. The first town died from a single bad decision. The second town died from 100 years of decisions, none of which anyone in Treece ever made. The chat piles were not put there by the residents. They were put there by mining companies that closed, declared bankruptcy, and left. The federal government, eventually, was forced to clean up a mess that nobody alive had created. And the cleanup, in the end, was not a cleanup. It was an erasure. Number 8. Picher, Oklahoma. The town that fell into its own basement. Picher is the larger, older sister of Treece, sitting 1 mile across the state line in Ottawa County, Oklahoma. At its peak in the 1920s, Picher was a city of 14,000 people. It had banks, hotels, a newspaper, a baseball team, and a mining payroll that produced over half of all the lead and zinc used by the United States in World War I. The town was rich. The town was loud. The town was, as one historian put it, the bright industrial heart of a region that did not know it was being hollowed out from below. Because that is what was happening. Underneath Picher, the mining companies were excavating chambers the size of cathedrals. Some of them were 200 feet wide. Some of them were 300 feet tall. The miners called these chambers stopes. By the time mining ended in the 1960s, there were thousands of stopes under Picher, supported by nothing but pillars of remaining ore and the prayers of the engineers who had drawn the maps. The maps were lost, or they were destroyed, or they were sold. By the 1980s, nobody could say with any confidence what was holding up the town. In 1996, a sinkhole opened in the parking lot of a Picher church. In 2003, a yard collapsed and swallowed a swing set. In 2006, the Army Corps of Engineers concluded that 86% of the residential structures in Picher sat directly above mine voids that could collapse at any time. And then came the tornado. In May of 2008, an EF4 tornado tore through Picher and killed 8 people. The Federal Emergency Management Agency arrived to assess the damage and quietly recommended that the town not be rebuilt. The Tar Creek Superfund buyout, which had been moving slowly for years, accelerated. By 2009, the city government of Picher voted to dissolve itself. The mayor, the city council, the police department, all gone by their own vote. The school district closed in 2009. The post office closed in 2014. Today, Picher is a city that voted to delete itself. The official population on the most recent census is somewhere between 0 and 10, depending on which holdouts are still alive. The streets are still paved. The houses are mostly demolished. The chat piles still tower over the empty grid. And underneath it all, the cathedral-sized chambers continue, slowly, to collapse. A town being eaten from below by the mines that built it. Number 7. Ruth, Nevada. The town that the copper company owns. Ruth is different. Ruth was not poisoned. Ruth was not flooded. Ruth was not legally dissolved. Ruth was bought. Ruth sits in White Pine County in eastern Nevada, about 300 miles north of Las Vegas, in one of the emptiest stretches of the American interior. It was founded in 1903 as a company town for the Nevada Consolidated Copper Company. Every house was company-owned. Every store was company-owned. Every road was company-owned. When you went to work in Ruth, you went to work for the company that owned the bed you slept in. The mine, an open-pit copper operation called the Robinson Mine, has expanded continuously for over a century. By the 1950s, the pit had eaten the original town site. The houses were moved on flatbed trucks to a new location half a mile away. By the 1980s, the pit had eaten the new location. The houses were moved again. The current Ruth, the third Ruth, sits on a small piece of land that is, by any honest measurement, surrounded on all sides by an active industrial mine. The current owner of the Robinson Mine is a multinational mining corporation. The corporation owns the land under Ruth. The corporation owns the road into Ruth. The corporation owns the water rights for Ruth. There is no mayor. There is no city council. The official population on the last census was approximately 300. Whether that number is accurate is a matter of some debate. Several investigative journalists have noted that Ruth does not appear on most commercial mapping services, that the road into it is gated, and that the gate is operated by mine security rather than by any public agency. You can drive to Ruth. You will not, however, simply pass through Ruth. The road ends at the gate. The gate is staffed. The signs are clear. This is private property. Beyond this point, you are the guest of a mining company. And the mining company has decided, for reasons that are not published, that the town behind the gate is not something the public mapping ecosystem needs to display. Here is the take. Times Beach and Treece and Picher were erased by the federal government because they were too poisoned to keep. Ruth was erased by a private corporation because it is too valuable to share. There are more Ruths in the American interior than most people realize. Company towns where the road ends at a gate. Where the sign is private, where the mapping service, mysteriously, declines to render the streets. Capitalism does not need the EPA to make a town disappear. Capitalism only needs a property line and a willing cartographer. Number 6. Mercury, Nevada. The city of 4,000 workers and 0 residents. Mercury sits 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas, on the southern edge of what used to be called the Nevada Test Site and is now called the Nevada National Security Site. From 1951 through 1992, the United States detonated 928 nuclear devices on this site. Most of them were underground. Some of them were not. The shock waves from the early atmospheric tests routinely cracked windows in Las Vegas. Mercury is the company town for these tests. It was built in 1950 by the Atomic Energy Commission to house the workers who handled the bombs. At its peak in the 1960s, Mercury had over 10,000 inhabitants, a bowling alley, a movie theater, a chapel, a post office, and a steakhouse. It was, in every functional sense, a small American city. It was also, in every legal sense, not a city. Mercury has never been incorporated. It has never had a mayor. It has never had a city council. It has never appeared on a census as a place where people live, because nobody is officially permitted to live there. Every person inside Mercury at any given moment is, on paper, a temporary visitor. The bowling alley exists, the movie theater exists, the chapel exists, but the town does not. Today, after the end of full-scale nuclear testing, Mercury houses approximately 4,000 workers per day. They commute in from Las Vegas in a fleet of government buses. They work an 8-hour shift. They commute out. The parking lot is full Monday through Friday. The parking lot is empty on weekends. There is no permanent population. There is, on the federal record, no town at all. Mercury is a place that exists only during business hours. Picture this. You are driving north on US Route 95. You pass a sign that says Mercury, Nevada, with an arrow pointing left. You take the exit. You drive half a mile. You stop at a gate manned by armed federal officers. The officers ask for your name. Your name is not on the list. The officers politely instruct you to turn around. You turn around, you drive back to the highway, and the place you almost saw, the place that has a chapel and a bowling alley and 4,000 parked cars, returns to its peculiar legal status as a town that technically is not. Number 5. Madrid, New Mexico, the town that was sold whole, twice. Madrid sits in the high desert south of Santa Fe, on the old Turquoise Trail. It was founded in the 1850s as a coal mining settlement. It grew. It boomed. By the 1930s, it had 3,000 residents, a company store, an employee hospital, a baseball stadium, and a Christmas light display so famous that pilots flying west from Albuquerque used it as a navigational landmark. The coal ran out in 1954. The mining company shut the mine. The miners left. Madrid emptied so completely, so fast, that the company simply locked the doors of every building and walked away. For the next 20 years, Madrid was a true ghost town, fully built, fully furnished, fully abandoned. In 1975, the heir to the original mining family, a man named Joe Huber, did something almost nobody had ever done in American history. He put the entire town up for sale, as one parcel. The asking price was $250,000. The listing was widely mocked at the time. Who buys a town? Nobody, as it turned out. The town did not sell as a single unit. So Huber subdivided it and sold the houses one by one, mostly to artists, hippies, and dropouts from the nearby Santa Fe scene. By the 1980s, Madrid had been repopulated, parcel by parcel, by a few hundred new residents who had purchased entire houses for, in some cases, less than $1,000 each. But here is what is strange about Madrid and why it belongs on this list. Madrid, on most federal documents, on most state records, and on most commercial maps, does not appear as a populated place. It is technically an unincorporated community. It has no city government. It has no zip code of its own. Its mail is delivered through a neighboring town. The census records its population only as part of a much larger county subdivision. If you search for Madrid, New Mexico on most mapping services, you will find a thin line of buildings along Highway 14 and almost no metadata. The town that was sold whole, that was bought back to life, that has art galleries and coffee shops and a working bar, exists in a kind of administrative twilight where the federal record and the lived reality have agreed, quietly, not to speak to each other. Number 4. Love Canal, New York, the neighborhood that ate itself. Love Canal is not a town in the strict sense. It is a neighborhood within the city of Niagara Falls, New York. It belongs on this list anyway, because it is the place that taught the United States that a populated American neighborhood can be sealed off and forgotten in the time it takes to print a federal evacuation order. In the 1890s, an entrepreneur named William T. Love began digging a canal between the upper and lower Niagara River. The project failed. The partial canal was abandoned, half-finished, a long, shallow trench in the ground. From 1942 through 1953, the Hooker Chemical Company used the abandoned canal as an industrial dump. 21,000 tons of chemical waste went into the trench. Then Hooker capped it with clay, sold the land to the Niagara Falls School District for $1, and walked away. The school district built an elementary school on top of the dump. A residential neighborhood grew up around the school. About 800 families moved in. They bought houses. They raised children. The children played in the yards. The yards, as it turned out, were sitting on top of one of the largest industrial chemical deposits in North America. By the 1970s, the chemicals had migrated. They were seeping into basements. They were appearing in puddles in the schoolyard. Children were getting sick at rates that local doctors could not explain. A housewife named Lois Gibbs, whose son had developed unexplained seizures shortly after starting kindergarten at the school, began organizing her neighbors. The Love Canal Homeowners Association was born. They documented illness. They documented chemical odors. They documented birth defects. They sent the documentation to the state of New York and to the federal government. In 1978, President Jimmy Carter declared a federal emergency at Love Canal. 800 families were evacuated. Their houses were purchased by the federal government. Most of the houses were demolished. The neighborhood was fenced off. The school was closed. The fence remains there today. If you drive through the relevant section of Niagara Falls, you will pass a chain-link fence around a several-block area of empty lots and cracked sidewalks behind it. The fence has been there since 1978. The houses are gone. The school is gone. The chemicals, however, are still there. The clay cap was breached decades ago. Periodic surveys have confirmed that the contamination is still leaking, slowly, into the surrounding soil. The Environmental Protection Agency monitors the site. The federal government does not, and has never declared Love Canal safe. Here is the take. Times Beach was killed by an outside contractor spraying poison on a road. Love Canal was killed by a chemical company that buried its waste, capped the hole, and sold the land to a school district for a single dollar. The company was not punished in any way that meaningfully affected its operations. The neighborhood was punished by being erased. This is the pattern. The pattern is not new. The pattern is, in many cases, still ongoing in places you have never heard of. Number 3. Hanford, Washington, the town that became a reactor. Hanford is the largest entry on this list, and in some ways, the strangest. In 1943, the United States War Department, in pursuit of the Manhattan Project, condemned a 670 square mile area of southeastern Washington state. Inside that area were 3 small towns, Hanford, White Bluffs, and Richland. and a number of Native American sacred sites belonging to the Wanapum, the Yakima, and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. The residents of the three towns were given 30 days to leave. Some were given less. They were paid, in most cases, less than the assessed value of their land. They were not told why. They were told only that the United States government required the property for a project of national significance. The houses, the schools, the churches, the cemeteries, the orchards were all left standing, abandoned, behind a perimeter fence that has now been in place for over 80 years. What the government built inside the fence was the world's first plutonium production complex. 9 nuclear reactors, multiple chemical separation plants, and the infrastructure required to produce the plutonium used in the Trinity test and in the Nagasaki bomb. The plutonium for nearly every American nuclear weapon manufactured between 1945 and 1987 came from Hanford. Today, the Hanford site is the most contaminated nuclear facility in the Western Hemisphere. There are 56 million gallons of high-level radioactive waste stored in underground tanks, many of which are leaking. The cleanup is projected to continue until at least 2070 and to cost in excess of $300 billion. Significant portions of the site are sealed to public access and will remain sealed for centuries. But here is what concerns this list. The original towns inside the fence, Hanford, White Bluffs, still technically exist as place names on certain federal documents. The streets are still mapped in classified atlases. The cemeteries are still there, behind the perimeter, untended. On commercial mapping services, however, you will find a vast green or beige polygon labeled, at most, __quote _3 with no internal detail. The towns inside it have been administratively folded out of public knowledge. They appear on no roadmap. They have no zip codes. They have no census records since 1943. They are, in every functional public sense, places that the United States has decided no longer exist, even though their streets, their building foundations, and their gravestones are still physically there, behind the fence, in the dust of the Columbia Plateau. Picture this. You stand on a hill above the Columbia River. You look east, across a vast, tan expanse of sagebrush and basalt. Somewhere in that expanse, beneath the wind, are the foundations of a town named White Bluffs that had a post office, a hotel, an orchard cooperative, and a population of approximately 1,500 people in 1942. Today, on the map in your phone, that location is a smooth, featureless, pale green polygon. There is no town. There never was a town. The map is very clear about that. Number 2. Picher's other ghost. The asbestos shadow of Ambler, Pennsylvania. Number 2 is harder to see than the others because it is not a single town. It is a category of town, the asbestos town. The American analog to Wittenoom in Australia. The places where the Keesby and Madison Company, the Johns Manville Corporation, and the Raybestos Manhattan Corporation produced asbestos products on an industrial scale, and where the residue of that production remains in the soil, in the air, and in the lungs of anyone who lived nearby. The most documented American example is Ambler, Pennsylvania, a small borough in Montgomery County, just outside Philadelphia. From the 1880s through the 1960s, Keesby and Madison, and later Nicollet Incorporated, produced asbestos products in Ambler. The waste from this production was piled in 2 enormous mounds on the edge of town. Locally, they were called the White Mountains. Children played on them. They were photographed for postcards. Nobody, for almost a century, told the residents of Ambler what the White Mountains contained. Ambler is not erased in the way that Times Beach is erased. The town still exists. It has a population. It has a city government. But significant sections of the town, the sections nearest the White Mountains, have been quietly fenced off, designated as Superfund sites, and removed from most local mapping detail. Houses that once stood there are gone. Streets that once ran past the mountains are now blocked. The fence has been there for decades, and the fence has slowly, in a way that residents have learned to live with, eaten the part of the town that used to be there. There are dozens of amblers across the United States. Manville, New Jersey, Tyler, Texas, Globe, Arizona. Each of them has a fence. Each of them has a section of the town that is no longer mapped. Each of them is a place where the federal government and the chemical industry and the local government have agreed, quietly, that there are pieces of America which the public mapping ecosystem does not need to render in full. Here is the take. The erasure of an American town is not always a single, dramatic event. Sometimes it is a slow process of fences and Superfund designations and quiet revisions to the publicly available mapping data. The town does not disappear all at once. It disappears block by block, year by year, until one day a tourist drives through and notices that the road they are following ends, abruptly, at a chain-link fence with a faded yellow sign on it. And the tourist does not stop. And the tourist drives on. And the disappearance of that block, of that fence, of that yellow sign becomes one more entry in the long American list of places that used to be there. If those 9 entries are about chemistry, about ore, about copper, about asbestos, about plutonium, then the number 1 entry on this list is not about any of those things. The number 1 entry is about politics, about continuity of government, about the place that the United States government has decided, by direct and explicit policy, that the public mapping ecosystem will not display. Number 1. Site R, Raven Rock Mountain Complex, Adams County, Pennsylvania. 6 miles north of the town of Blue Ridge Summit, on the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, there is a mountain. It is called Raven Rock. It is a long, low ridge of greenstone and quartzite, heavily wooded, unremarkable from the air. If you drive past it on Pennsylvania Route 16, you will see a wooded mountain. You will see a road that leads up to it. You will see a small green sign that says simply, U.S. government property, no trespassing. You will not see what is inside the mountain. What is inside the mountain is a city. Construction began in 1950. Operations began in 1953. The complex inside Raven Rock Mountain consists of, by publicly acknowledged records, 5 3-story buildings, mounted on enormous steel springs to absorb the shock of a nuclear strike, contained inside a cavern excavated by the Army Corps of Engineers across the entire interior of the ridge. The complex has its own water supply, its own power generation, its own sewage treatment, its own dining facilities, its own medical clinic, its own chapel, and a permanent staff that, according to declassified Federation of American Scientists briefings, numbers in the thousands. Raven Rock is the alternate command and control facility for the United States Department of Defense. In the event that the Pentagon is destroyed, in the event that Washington itself is destroyed, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the operational command of the United States military are projected to relocate to Raven Rock and continue functioning. It is, in effect, the backup Pentagon, the shadow capital, the room that exists so that the United States, as an institution, can survive the disappearance of the United States as a city. Here is what concerns this list. The town that supports Raven Rock, the housing, the access roads, the supply infrastructure, the parking facilities, is not on any commercial map. The roads that lead up to the mountain are removed from public mapping services. The zip codes that historically served this section of Adams County have been administratively reorganized in ways that researchers, repeatedly, have characterized as deliberately obfuscating. The census records for the populated area immediately around Raven Rock are aggregated into a much larger county subdivision in a way that makes it impossible to determine, from the public record, how many people live and work in the immediate vicinity of the mountain. If you open your mapping application right now and search for Raven Rock Mountain Complex, you will, depending on which service you use, get one of 3 results. You will get nothing at all. You will get a generic mountain label with no metadata. Or you will get a wooded polygon labeled in some services as restricted, with no roads visible inside it, even though satellite imagery clearly shows roads leading up to and around the facility. Remember Mercury, Nevada from earlier in this list? Remember the gate. Remember the 4,000 cars in the parking lot of a town that, on paper, has no residents. Mercury at least admits, on its sign, that it is there. The gate has the word Mercury on it. The federal record acknowledges that the place exists, even if it claims, against all observable reality, that nobody lives there. Raven Rock does not even do that. The sign on Pennsylvania Route 16 does not say Raven Rock. It says U.S. government property. The road does not appear on the map. The town that supports the facility does not appear on the map. The zip codes have been redistributed. The census has been aggregated. And the mailman from the beginning of this video drives every weekday up a road that the public mapping ecosystem does not acknowledge, to a mailbox that serves an address that is not in any commercial database, and he drops 3 letters into it, and somebody, on a schedule that aligns with the operational shifts of a facility that the United States Department of Defense will not officially confirm exists in the location it exists in, picks up the mail. Picture this. You drive north on Pennsylvania Route 16 on a gray autumn afternoon. The leaves are off the trees. The mountain is visible to your right. You see the green sign. You see the gated road. You see, just barely, through the trees, the shape of a structure that is too rectangular and too pale to be a rock formation. You take out your phone. You open your Maps application. You search for the location you are at. The application shows you a wooded green polygon and a thin gray ribbon of Route 16. There is no road leading up to the mountain. There is no facility on the mountain. There is no town behind the mountain. According to the map in your hand, you are looking at a forest. You look up, through the windshield, at the shape that is too rectangular to be a rock. You look down at the map. You look up again. The map and the world disagree, and the map is the one that is lying. Here is the take. Times Beach was erased because it was poisoned. Treece was erased because it was bankrupt. Picher was erased because it was collapsing. Ruth was erased because a mining company wanted privacy. Mercury was erased because of nuclear weapons. Madrid was erased by accidental administrative neglect. Love Canal was erased by an industrial cover-up. Hanford was erased by the Manhattan Project. Ambler was erased by the asbestos industry. Raven Rock was erased on purpose, by direct policy, by the United States Department of Defense, in coordination with the Department of Energy, because the United States government decided that the existence of its own backup capital is something the public mapping ecosystem is not permitted to display. This is not a glitch. This is not an oversight. This is policy. There is an office in Washington whose job it is to make sure that the maps you carry in your pocket do not show you certain coordinates inside your own country. That office has been doing its job for over 70 years. It is doing its job right now. And the next time you open your phone and zoom in on a wooded patch of Adams County, Pennsylvania, and see nothing but trees, you can reflect on the fact that the trees on your screen are the work product of a federal employee whose name you will never know, doing a job that you were never told existed, in service of a doctrine that has not been put up for a vote in any election you have ever participated in. End of countdown. So here is what you take with you. 10 towns, 10 coordinates. 9 of them killed by chemistry, by economy, by ore, by industry, by neglect. 1 of them killed by direct order of the United States government in the name of strategic continuity. All of them missing in one form or another from the maps you use every day. The map in your pocket is not the map of the country. The country has hidden rooms. Some of them are sealed because the floor is poison. Some of them are sealed because the ceiling is collapsing. Some of them are sealed because a corporation owns them and has decided you do not need to walk through. And one of them, the one we ended on tonight, is sealed because somebody, in an office you cannot find, decided that the survival of the federal government in the event of nuclear war is a piece of geography you are not entitled to know. Hit the like button. Not because I need the engagement metric, because you now know coordinates that the people who make the maps would prefer you did not know. That knowledge is worth a click. Subscribe to Report State. The next episode is about the towns that hide in plain sight, the ones that are still on the map, still in the census, still on the highway signs, but that nobody, for reasons we will document, ever talks about on the news. The mailman is still driving up a road that the map does not show. He is doing it right now while you are watching this. He is dropping 3 letters into a steel mailbox bolted into a concrete post on a road that the United States government will not formally acknowledge exists. By the end of this week, the letters will be gone. Somebody will have picked them up. Somebody always picks them up. The mail still arrives. Somebody still picks it up.